officer. This is a federal immigration matter. We've got it under control
Sir,
here.
I need to see your credentials. Federal ID and badge right now.
We're in the middle of an operation. I can show you ID after we secure the scene.
No, sir, you'll show me ID right now.
That's not how this works. We don't have time for this. We have authority to enter this residence.
Then you'll have documentation of that authority.
Not everyone wearing a badge earned it. Not everyone claiming federal authority actually has it. And sometimes the real criminals are the ones pretending to enforce the law, counting on fear and intimidation to get them through doors they have no legal right to open. What Officer Daniel Bradley's body cam captured that Tuesday morning wasn't a routine call about a disturbance. It was the unraveling of an organized crime operation that had been using fake ICE credentials to rob immigrant families, banking on the fact that their victims would be too scared to call real police. The footage shows the exact moment when three men pretending to be federal agents realized they'd picked the wrong house, targeted the wrong family, and run into a cop who knew exactly what real ICE procedures looked like. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. The subdivision was middle-class suburban, the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors and watched out for each other. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, minivans and driveways. The Rodriguez house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, a modest two-story with a neat yard and children's toys visible through the front window. On a Tuesday morning in late September, with the sun bright and the temperature mild, it looked like the safest place in the world. Officer Daniel Bradley had been with the department for 11 years, the last 4 as a community liaison officer specifically assigned to immigrant neighborhoods. He spoke fluent Spanish, had completed extensive training on immigration law and federal-local cooperation protocols, and had built relationships with families who'd learned they could trust him. When the 911 call came in at 10:23 a.m., a woman reporting that people claiming to be ICE were trying to force their way into her home, Bradley was 3 blocks away and responded immediately. His body cam activated automatically when he exited his patrol car at 10:26 a.m. The footage shows him approaching the Rodriguez residence, where a late-model black SUV with tinted windows was parked in the driveway. No government plates. No official markings. Just a vehicle that could have belonged to anyone. The front door was partially open. Bradley could hear raised voices from inside, male voices demanding entry, a female voice insisting on seeing credentials. He pressed the doorbell camera button and knocked firmly. "Police. This is Officer Bradley with the police department. I'm responding to a 911 call." The voices inside went quiet for a moment. Then a man appeared at the door wearing a dark face covering that concealed most of their head and face, a green tactical vest, and a long-sleeve uniform with "Police IC" on it. He was white, late 30s, buzz cut visible above the face covering, the kind of aggressive posture that suggested he wasn't used to being questioned. "Officer, this is a federal immigration matter. We've got it under control." Bradley's body cam captured his response, professional but firm. "Sir, I need to see your credentials. Federal ID and badge." The man hesitated just a fraction of a second, but Bradley caught it. "We're in the middle of an operation. I can show you ID after we've secured the scene." "No sir, you'll show me ID right now." "That's not how this works." A second man appeared behind the first, also wearing a dark face covering, green tactical vest, and the same long-sleeve uniform with "Police IC" printed on it, also white, younger, early 20s maybe. "Officer, we don't have time for this. We have authority to enter this residence to apprehend an immigration fugitive." Bradley stood his ground. "Then you'll have documentation of that authority. Warrant, administrative order, something in writing. And I'll need to verify your credentials before you proceed." The first man's expression hardened. "Are you interfering with a federal operation?" "I'm responding to a 911 call from a homeowner who says people are trying to force their way into her house. So yeah, I'm going to verify who you are and what authority you have. Credentials. Now." The body cam shows the 2 men exchange a glance. The first one reached slowly into his vest pocket and pulled out what looked like a badge wallet. He flipped it open, showing what appeared to be an ICE badge and ID card. Bradley took it, examining it closely. The badge looked real at first glance, eagle emblem, Department of Homeland Security seal, IC across the top. But the ID card had tells. The photo quality was slightly off. The holographic seal didn't catch the light quite right. And most importantly, the credential number format didn't match what Bradley knew IC credentials used. "This doesn't look right," Bradley said, his hand moving to his service weapon, not drawing it but ready. "I'm going to need you to step outside the residence. Both of you." "What? We showed you ID. We're ICE agents." "Step outside." "No. There's a third person in there, I want them out here too. The first man's face changed. The aggressive confidence shifted to something more calculating. Officer, I don't know what you think you're seeing, but... Out. No. Hands visible. The body cam captured the moment perfectly. The two men stepped out onto the porch and Bradley called into the house. Third person inside, come out with your hands visible. Police. A third man emerged, also wearing the dark face covering, green tactical vest, and police IC uniform, Latino, older, maybe late 40s. All three stood on the porch, and Bradley could see Mrs. Rodriguez in the background, standing in her living room with her phone still in her hand, her face a mixture of relief and confusion. Ma'am, are you okay? Bradley called past the men. Yes, officer. They tried to come in. They said they were ICE and they needed to search my house. I asked for a warrant and they said they didn't need one. Bradley kept his attention on the three men while speaking to dispatch on his shoulder radio. Dispatch, I need backup to my location. 3 individuals claiming to be federal agents, credentials appear fraudulent, attempted illegal entry into a residence. The first man's posture shifted from aggressive to defensive. This is ridiculous. We're legitimate ICE agents conducting. You're what now? Bradley interrupted. Because I've worked with actual ICE agents. I've been through joint training. I know what their credentials look like, I know what their procedures are, and nothing about this, he gestured to them, the vehicle, the situation, matches protocol. So we're going to wait right here for my supervisor and possibly actual federal agents to sort this out. The younger man made a move like he might bolt. Bradley's hand went to his weapon. Don't. Hands where I can see them. All 3 of you. 2 more patrol units arrived within 90 seconds, their body cams adding additional angles to the footage. The 3 men were separated, each with an officer watching them. Bradley entered the Rodriguez home to check on the family. The body cam footage from inside the house is particularly damning. The living room showed no signs of any legitimate law enforcement operation. No warrant posted. No official notices. Just a frightened family, Mrs. Rodriguez, her husband Carlos, and their teenage daughter Maria, standing in their own home, shaken by what had just happened. Mrs. Rodriguez, can you tell me exactly what happened? Bradley asked in Spanish, the body cam capturing her response. They knocked on the door about 10 minutes before I called you. 3 men wearing face coverings and green vests that said, Police IC. They said they were looking for someone, showed me a paper with a name I didn't recognize. I said that person doesn't live here, showed them my ID, my husband's ID, our documents. They said they needed to search anyway. I asked for a warrant. They said they didn't need one. I said they couldn't come in without one. They tried to push past me. That's when I called 911. Did they show you any official paperwork? Court orders, administrative warrants, anything? Just that paper with the name. It looked like it was printed on regular paper. Not official. Bradley photographed the document Mrs. Rodriguez had taken from them. A poorly formatted page claiming to be an ICE detainer, printed on standard copy paper with a name that didn't match anyone in the household. Back outside, Bradley's supervisor had arrived. Sergeant Linda Morrison, a 20-year veteran who'd seen her share of unusual situations. The body cam caught their conversation. What we got, Bradley? 3 men claiming to be ICE agents, attempting to enter a residence without a warrant, credentials appear fake, no proper documentation, homeowner refused entry and called 911. Morrison examined the fake badges that had been collected from each man. These are garbage. The serial numbers don't follow DHS format. The holograms are printed, not embedded. Did you run their names? Not yet, Sergeant. Wanted to secure the scene first. Good call. Let's see what we're really dealing with here. One of the other officers ran the names through the system. The results came back fast. None of the 3 men were federal agents. All 3 had criminal records. The first man who'd given the name Thomas Diaz actually was Thomas Diaz, but he had a record for fraud and identity theft. The younger one, James Wu, was actually James Wu with priors for burglary. The older Latino man, Rafael Santos, had convictions for robbery and impersonating an officer. When confronted with their real identities, the story started to crack. We were just trying to serve a warrant, Diaz tried. A warrant for who? For what? Issued by what court? Morrison pressed. Silence. Here's what I think happened, Morrison said, her voice hardening. I think you 3 have been running a scam. Dressing up like ICE agents, targeting immigrant families who are scared of deportation, using that fear to get into homes and rob them. How many families have you hit? More silence, but the look on Diaz's face confirmed it. A real ICE supervisor arrived 30 minutes later, contacted by the police department to verify whether any legitimate operations were happening in the area. Special Agent in charge Victor Mendoza took one look at the fake credentials and shook his head. These are props. Bad ones. No ICE operation was authorized in this neighborhood today or any day this month. These men are not federal agents. Mendoza's statement was captured on body cam. I want to be clear for the record. These individuals have no affiliation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They are impersonating federal officers, which is a federal felony. ICE will fully cooperate with local law enforcement in prosecuting this case, and we'll be conducting our own investigation to determine if other families have been victimized by this scam. The 3 men were arrested on multiple charges: impersonating federal officers, attempted burglary, fraud, criminal trespassing, and conspiracy. Their vehicle was impounded and searched, revealing a trunk full of evidence: more green tactical vests, face coverings, police IC uniforms, fake badges, zip ties, a list of addresses in predominantly immigrant neighborhoods, and cash and jewelry that would later be traced to other robberies. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the operation. Over 6 months, the 3 men had hit 17 different homes in 3 counties. They'd stolen over $200,000 in cash, jewelry, and electronics from families who were too terrified to report the robberies because they feared deportation or didn't trust authorities. Detectives traced the operation back to its beginning. Diaz had purchased the green tactical vests, face coverings, and uniforms with Police IC printed on them from an online vendor that catered to security companies and film productions. The vests cost $40 each. The uniforms were $35. The face coverings were cheap tactical balaclavas. For less than $250, they'd equip themselves to commit crimes that would net them thousands of dollars per home. Their method was consistent across all 17 robberies. They'd identify neighborhoods with high immigrant populations. They'd park on a residential street and watch for homes that looked occupied during weekday mornings when men were typically at work and women might be home alone with children. They'd approach the door in their green vests and face coverings, claim to be looking for a specific person, always using a generic Hispanic name, and when told that person didn't live there, they'd insist on searching anyway. Most families let them in. The fear of actual IC was so strong, the understanding of rights so uncertain, the trust in challenging authority so limited, that families would step aside and let 3 armed strangers search their homes. The search always ended with demands for cash and jewelry, threats about deportation if the theft was reported, and the family left traumatized and violated in their own living room. What made the Rodriguez case different was Mrs. Rodriguez's knowledge of her rights and her willingness to call 911. She'd attended a Know Your Rights workshop at her church 6 months earlier, run by an immigrant rights organization that specifically covered what to do if ICE came to your door. She'd learned that ICE needs warrants for home entries in most circumstances, that you can ask to see credentials, that you can call a lawyer or the police to verify their identity. When the 3 men tried to force their way in, Mrs. Rodriguez recognized that something wasn't right. Real ICE agents, she'd learned, don't generally try to physically push past people. They don't refuse to show proper paperwork. They don't get aggressive when asked to wait for verification. Her gut told her these men were not who they claimed to be, and she trusted that instinct enough to call for help. The detective who led the investigation, a woman named Investigator Rachel Kim, interviewed all 17 victim families. Many were reluctant to participate at first, still scared despite being told the men were not real federal agents. Kim worked with community organizations and immigrant advocacy groups to build trust, to help families understand that prosecuting these predators would actually make their communities safer. Should impersonating a federal agent carry mandatory minimum prison sentences with no possibility of plea deals? Comment below, because what these 3 men did wasn't just theft. It was predatory targeting of vulnerable families using the fear of immigration enforcement as a weapon, exploiting the very real terror that ICE raids create in immigrant communities. The evidence Kim compiled was staggering. Bank records showing cash deposits that corresponded with robbery dates. Pawn shop records showing jewelry matching descriptions from victims. Cell phone records placing all 3 men in the vicinity of each robbery. And most damning, a notebook found in Santos's apartment with addresses listed, dollar amounts next to some of them, and notes like, "Scared easy," or "Refused, moved on." The trial took place 8 months later. The body cam footage from Bradley and the other responding officers was the prosecution's primary evidence. The jury watched Bradley confront the men, watched their fake credentials get exposed, watched them try to maintain the lie even as it fell apart. 17 victims testified. Families who'd had men in fake IC vests force their way into homes, demand money and valuables while threatening deportation, and leave them traumatized and violated. Mrs. Rodriguez testified about the terror of having armed men try to force their way into her home while her daughter was there, about the split-second decision to call 911 despite being afraid, about the relief when Officer Bradley arrived and actually checked their credentials instead of just deferring to the fake federal authority. One victim, an older woman named Esperanza Gomez, testified through tears about how the men had taken her wedding ring, the only thing she had from her deceased husband, while her grandchildren watched in terror. They said if I called police, my grandchildren would be taken from me and sent back to El Salvador. My grandchildren were born here. They are Americans. But I was so scared I believed them. Another victim, a construction worker named Miguel Torres, described coming home from his job to find his wife sobbing, their savings, $3,000 in cash they'd been saving to buy a used car, gone. She was ashamed. She thought she'd done something wrong by letting them in. I told her she did nothing wrong. These men, they wore masks and green vests with police IC on their uniforms. They looked official. They used our fear against us. The defense tried to argue that the men were just trying to make money, that they never actually hurt anyone physically, that the robberies were nonviolent. But the prosecution showed that psychological violence is still violence, that terrorizing families in their homes is assault even without physical contact, that exploiting fear of deportation to rob people is as predatory as it gets. The evidence was overwhelming. The fake badges. The list of targeted addresses, all in immigrant communities. The stolen property. The victim's testimony. The body cam footage showing the men trying to maintain their lie even when confronted by real law enforcement. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts for all 3 defendants. Guilty. The sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later. Federal charges for impersonating federal officers. State charges for burglary, fraud, and conspiracy. The judge, a stern woman named Melissa Zhang who'd been on the bench for 20 years, heard victim impact statements from families who'd been robbed, who'd been traumatized, who'd stopped feeling safe in their own homes. One woman testified through tears, I came to this country for safety. I work hard. I pay taxes. I follow laws. And these men came into my house pretending to be government and stole the money I was saving to bring my mother here legally. They told me if I called police I would be deported. They stole my money and my sense of security. Judge Zhang's sentencing statement was captured in the court record. The defendants exploited the most vulnerable members of our community. They weaponized fear of immigration enforcement to commit robbery. They traumatized families in their own homes. They impersonated federal officers, undermining trust in legitimate law enforcement. Their actions were calculated, predatory, and sustained over months. The sentence must reflect the severity of these crimes and the number of victims harmed. Thomas Diaz, 7 years in federal prison. James Wu, 7 years in federal prison. Rafael Santos, 7 years in federal prison. All 3 were also ordered to pay restitution totaling $200,000 to the victims, though realistically the families would likely never see most of that money. The 3 men were led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Their green tactical vests, face coverings, police IC uniforms, and fake badges were entered into evidence and would eventually be destroyed. The families they'd victimized watched from the gallery, some crying, some stoic, all finally seeing justice for what had been done to them. Officer Daniel Bradley attended the sentencing. Afterward, Mrs. Rodriguez approached him with her family. Thank you, she said in Spanish. Thank you for checking. Thank you for not just believing them because they had vests and badges. Thank you for protecting us. Bradley responded, also in Spanish, that's the job. I'm just sorry it took so long for someone to catch them. You caught them, she said. Because I called and you came and you cared enough to verify. That matters. The case became a training example for police departments across the region. The body cam footage was used to teach officers what fraudulent credentials look like, what real ICE procedures are, and why it's critical to verify federal authority claims rather than just deferring to anyone with a badge and a vest. ICE itself used the case to issue warnings to immigrant communities. Real ICE agents follow specific protocols, carry genuine credentials, generally have warrants or court orders for home entries, and will allow you to verify their identity through official channels. If someone claiming to be ICE tries to force entry without documentation, you have the right to ask them to wait while you call police to verify their authority. The Rodriguez family became advocates, speaking at community meetings about their experience, encouraging other immigrant families not to be afraid to call 911 if something feels wrong, emphasizing that local police are not ICE and are there to protect residents regardless of immigration status. The fake ICE operation had succeeded for 6 months because families were too scared to report it. It ended when one family was brave enough to call for help, and one officer was thorough enough to verify rather than assume. Bradley received a commendation for his handling of the situation. At the ceremony, he was asked what made him suspicious enough to check credentials rather than just accepting the men's claim to federal authority. "A few things," he explained. "No government plates on the vehicle. No official paperwork." The homeowner's fear seemed genuine, not like someone who was hiding something but like someone who was being victimized. "And honestly, I've worked with real ICE agents on joint operations. These guys didn't act right, didn't talk right, didn't follow any protocols. Real federal agents don't try to intimidate local police. They coordinate with us. These guys were adversarial from the start, which was a red flag." He continued, "But the biggest thing was Mrs. Rodriguez's call. She didn't call saying, 'ICE is here, help me hide.' She called saying, 'People claiming to be ICE are trying to force into my home without a warrant.' That's different. That's someone who knows their rights being violated by people she doesn't think are legitimate. I trusted her instincts." The body cam footage lives on in training databases, a 7-minute lesson in why verification matters, why questioning authority isn't the same as obstructing it, and why protecting vulnerable communities requires officers who understand the laws and procedures they're supposed to enforce. The 3 men are serving their 7-year sentences in federal facilities. Diaz filed an appeal claiming the sentence was excessive. It was denied. Wu wrote letters to several of the victims apologizing. Most didn't respond, though one family sent a letter back saying they'd forgive him when he paid back what he stole, which, given his financial situation, likely means never. Santos accepted his sentence without appeal and reportedly spends his time in prison warning other inmates not to impersonate federal agents because they take that shit seriously. The Rodriguez family still lives in the same house. They installed additional security cameras and a video doorbell after the incident, but they feel safe again. Their daughter Maria wants to become a police officer when she grows up, inspired by Officer Bradley's response to her mother's 911 call. The sitting room where it all started looks ordinary now. Comfortable couch, family photos on the walls, children's backpacks by the door. Nothing to indicate it was once the scene of a confrontation between a real cop and fake federal agents. Nothing to show that this living room became the place where a crime operation that had terrorized 17 families finally came to an end. But the Rodriguez family knows. Every time they sit in that room, they remember the morning 3 men tried to force their way in using fake badges and real fear. They remember Mrs. Rodriguez's split-second decision to call 911 instead of complying. They remember Officer Bradley stepping through that door and doing what police are supposed to do, protect people and verify the truth before acting. The body cam footage shows it all. The confrontation at the door. The fake credentials being exposed. The arrest. The evidence that would put 3 predators in prison for 7 years each. All captured from the perspective of a cop's chest camera, a technological witness that couldn't be intimidated or lied to, that preserved every moment of 3 criminals realizing they'd finally met someone who wouldn't just take their word for it. Sometimes justice comes down to simple things. A homeowner brave enough to call for help. A cop thorough enough to verify credentials. A body camera recording evidence that couldn't be disputed. And a family that refused to be victims quietly, who insisted on their rights even when threatened, who proved that sometimes the people who seem most vulnerable are actually the strongest when they decide to fight back. The fake green vests, face coverings, police IC uniforms, and badges are gone now, destroyed as evidence after the trial. But the lesson remains, preserved in body cam footage and shared in training sessions. Not everyone wearing a badge earned it, not everyone claiming authority has it, and the real criminals are sometimes the ones pretending to be the law. If you believe that protecting vulnerable communities requires officers who verify rather than assume, and that impersonating federal agents should result in serious prison time, subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow we bring another story proving that sometimes the camera on a cop's chest captures exactly the kind of justice we need to see.